I am Charlotte, 32 years old, and I own a hospitality empire worth over $50 million. When my brother's wedding planner called me in a panic, screaming that I had tripled their venue budget and demanding I cancel my little event, she had no idea she was talking to the owner of the most exclusive wedding venue in Northern California. The same venue where my brother Marcus was planning his dream wedding, the ultimate twist of fate. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Growing up in suburban Sacramento, the hierarchy in the Richardson household was established before I could even walk. My parents, David and Susan Richardson, had created a family dynamic where my older brother Marcus reigned supreme while I existed in his considerable shadow. Marcus was everything my parents had dreamed of in a firstborn son. 4 years my senior, he possessed the kind of natural charisma that made adults smile and nod approvingly whenever he entered a room. He was captain of the varsity soccer team, president of student council, and maintained a perfect GPA without seeming to break a sweat. Meanwhile, I was the quiet, younger sister whose accomplishments barely registered as footnotes in the grand narrative of Marcus's success. The disparity in treatment wasn't subtle. When Marcus scored the winning goal in the regional championships, my parents threw a celebration dinner with extended family, ordering a custom cake and inviting half the neighborhood. When I won first place in the state science fair for my project on sustainable architecture, my mother gave me a distracted pat on the head while rushing to pick up Marcus's dry cleaning for his college interviews. This pattern became so ingrained that I stopped expecting anything different. Christmas mornings meant watching Marcus unwrap expensive electronics and sports equipment while I received practical gifts like books and clothes. Parent-teacher conferences revolved around discussing Marcus's college prospects, while my teacher's glowing reports about my creativity and academic potential were met with polite but disinterested nods. The worst part wasn't the unequal treatment itself, but how Marcus leveraged his golden child status. He understood perfectly that he could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, and he used this knowledge to his advantage at every opportunity. When he borrowed my bike without asking and returned it broken, my parents suggested I should be more careful about where I left my things. When he forgot to include me in plans with his friends, leaving me stranded at school events, they praised his busy social calendar as evidence of his leadership abilities. By high school, Marcus had developed an entitled attitude that extended far beyond our family dynamics. He genuinely believed he was superior to most people, not just me, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences for his actions. Teachers loved him, coaches recruited him, and college admissions officers courted him with scholarship offers. During this time, I discovered my passion for design and hospitality through an unlikely source. Our high school's annual fundraising gala was typically a modest affair held in the gymnasium with basic decorations and catering. But the year I turned 16, budget cuts threatened to cancel the event entirely. I volunteered to help coordinate it, seeing an opportunity to apply the design principles I had been studying in my free time. Working with a budget of less than $2,000, I transformed that gymnasium into something magical. I negotiated with local vendors for donated flowers, convinced art students to create custom centerpieces, and somehow arranged for a local restaurant to provide catering at cost. The event raised more money than any previous gala in the school's history, and for the first time, I felt the rush of creating something beautiful that brought people joy. When I excitedly shared this success at the dinner table, my father barely looked up from his newspaper, while my mother murmured something about it being nice hobby work. The conversation immediately shifted to Marcus's latest soccer recruitment visit, and my moment of pride deflated like a punctured balloon. That night, lying in bed, I made a decision that would shape the rest of my life. I would stop seeking validation from people who had already decided I wasn't worth their attention. Instead, I would focus on developing my talents and building something meaningful, even if no one in my family cared to notice. College presented an opportunity for a fresh start, but the financial reality reflected the same family priorities that had defined my childhood. Marcus received a partial athletic scholarship to UC Berkeley, with my parents eagerly covering the remaining expenses for what they called the investment in his future. When it came time for my college applications, they made it clear that I would need to find my own way. I applied for every scholarship available, worked 2 part-time jobs throughout my senior year, and ultimately accepted a partial need-based scholarship to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, where I planned to study architecture with a minor in business administration. The program wasn't as prestigious as Marcus's economics degree at Berkeley, but it offered exactly the combination of creativity and practical skills I needed to pursue my vision. The summer before college, while Marcus enjoyed a graduation trip to Europe funded by our parents, I worked full-time at a local event planning company. The owner, Maria Santos, became my first real mentor. She recognized something in me that my own family had missed, a natural ability to see the bigger picture while managing countless small details simultaneously. Maria taught me that successful event planning wasn't just about pretty decorations or good food. It was about understanding people, anticipating their needs, and creating experiences that exceeded their expectations. Under her guidance, I learned to coordinate with vendors, manage budgets, handle crisis situations, and most importantly, how to make clients feel like their events were the most important thing in the world. During holiday breaks from college, I would return home to find the family dynamics unchanged. Dinner conversations still revolved around Marcus's internships, his girlfriend Jennifer from a prominent San Francisco family, and his post-graduation plans to attend law school. My own academic achievements, including making Dean's List 3 consecutive semesters and leading several successful campus events, merited only polite acknowledgement before the focus returned to the family's real star. The disconnect became even more pronounced during my junior year when I started my own small event planning business, operating out of my dorm room and handling birthday parties, small weddings, and corporate events for local San Luis Obispo clients. The business grew organically through word-of-mouth referrals, and by my senior year, I was earning more money than many of my classmates' part-time jobs combined. When I mentioned this success during a rare family dinner, my father chuckled and said it was good practice for real-world responsibility. Marcus, now in his first year of law school, made a joke about me becoming a professional party planner, using a tone that made it clear he considered this beneath serious consideration. What they failed to understand was that I wasn't just planning parties. I was building relationships with vendors, developing an understanding of luxury markets, and learning the complex logistics that make high-end events possible. Every wedding I coordinated taught me something new about client psychology, vendor management, or crisis prevention. Every corporate retreat I organized expanded my network and enhanced my reputation for reliability and creativity. By graduation, I had saved enough money to consider several options for my future. Marcus, meanwhile, was preparing for his final year of law school with plans to join a prestigious firm in San Francisco. The family narrative remained consistent. He was destined for greatness, while I was pursuing an uncertain path in what they perceived as a frivolous industry. The gap between their perception and my reality was growing wider with each passing month, but I had long since stopped trying to bridge it. Instead, I focused on the vision that had been crystallizing throughout my college years. I wanted to create something extraordinary in the hospitality industry, something that would establish new standards for luxury and service. I just never imagined that my family's continued dismissal would eventually lead to the most ironic confrontation of my life, centered around a venue they didn't even know I owned. After graduating from Cal Poly with highest honors, I moved to Napa Valley with $3,000 in savings, a used Honda Civic, and a business plan that most people would have called impossibly ambitious. While Marcus celebrated his law school graduation with a family party that cost more than my entire moving budget, I was quietly laying the groundwork for something revolutionary in the luxury hospitality industry. My first apartment was a studio above a bakery in downtown Napa, where the smell of fresh bread became my daily alarm clock. The space was tiny, but the location was strategic. I was positioned in the heart of wine country, surrounded by some of the world's most exclusive venues and wealthiest clientele, yet somehow overlooked by the established event planning companies who focused on Sonoma's more famous properties. My breakthrough came through pure persistence and a willingness to work for almost nothing. Elena Vasquez, who owned a struggling boutique winery called Sunset Ridge, needed someone to coordinate a last-minute corporate retreat for a tech company from Silicon Valley. The previous planner had canceled 3 days before the event, and Elena was desperate. I offered to handle everything for just the cost of materials, knowing that this was my chance to prove what I could accomplish. For 72 hours straight, I coordinated with caterers, musicians, florists, and transportation companies, creating a seamless experience that exceeded every expectation. The tech executives were so impressed, they immediately booked me for their annual company retreat. More importantly, they started referring me to their network of successful entrepreneurs and venture capitalists. Within 6 months, I had enough clients to quit my part-time job at a local restaurant and focus entirely on building my event planning business. During this period, my family assumed I was struggling to make ends meet as a small-town party planner. Marcus, now working as an associate at Henderson, Mills and Associates in San Francisco, would occasionally call with condescending offers to help me find a real job in the city. My parents sent care packages filled with canned goods and $20 bills, apparently convinced that I was barely surviving on my artistic pursuits. The irony was that I was earning more money than Marcus, despite his prestigious law firm salary. Luxury event planning in Napa Valley commanded premium prices, and my reputation for creating unforgettable experiences was spreading rapidly through California's wealthy social circles. My real education came from observing the venues where I planned events. I studied everything: traffic flow patterns, kitchen logistics, acoustic properties, lighting possibilities, and most importantly, the subtle details that separated good venues from legendary ones. I noticed how certain spaces made guests feel immediately comfortable, while others, despite expensive renovations, never quite achieved the right atmosphere. 2 years into my business, I encountered my first major setback when the Grandview Estate, my most reliable venue partner, was sold to developers who planned to convert it into condominiums. Suddenly, I had 6 major events booked with nowhere to host them. The other premium venues in the area were either already booked or demanded outrageous fees that would have bankrupted my clients. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. That crisis forced me to think differently about my business model. Instead of relying on other people's venues, I needed to control my own spaces. I spent the next month driving through every corner of Napa and Sonoma counties, looking for properties with potential that others had overlooked. I found it on a winding road 15 minutes outside St. Helena, a 200-acre estate with a crumbling Victorian mansion, overgrown gardens, and spectacular views of the valley floor. The property had been on the market for 2 years because it needed massive renovations, and the zoning restrictions made development challenging. But I saw something different. The mansion's bones were solid, the gardens could be restored to surpass their original glory, and the natural amphitheater formed by the hillside would create an outdoor ceremony space unlike anything else in the region. Most importantly, the existing agricultural zoning actually favored the kind of exclusive events I specialized in. Convincing the bank to give me a loan was nearly impossible. I was 26 years old with limited assets and a business model that most traditional lenders didn't understand. After rejections from 7 different banks, I finally found a loan officer who had attended one of my events and understood the potential I was describing. The renovation process consumed the next 18 months of my life. I lived in a travel trailer on the property, working 16-hour days to coordinate contractors, designers, and the endless permits required for such an extensive project. I learned to tile bathrooms, install light fixtures, and landscape gardens, not because I couldn't afford professionals, but because I wanted to understand every aspect of what I was creating. The mansion's restoration revealed hidden treasures: original hardwood floors beneath decades of carpet, hand-painted ceiling murals covered by layers of white paint, and a wine cellar that connected to natural caves extending deep into the hillside. Each discovery influenced my design decisions, creating spaces that honored the property's history while providing modern luxury amenities. During this period, Marcus got engaged to Jennifer Walsh, whose father owned a chain of successful restaurants throughout Northern California. The announcement came with great fanfare from my parents, who immediately began planning an elaborate engagement party and discussing wedding venues that would benefit such an important union. When they mentioned their search for the perfect location, I almost revealed what I was building, but something held me back. Perhaps it was the years of dismissive comments about my career choices, or maybe I wanted to see how far their assumptions would carry them. Either way, I kept my project secret, mentioning only that I was working on expanding the business. The grand opening of Ethereal Gardens Estate happened on a perfect October evening in 2019. I had invited 50 of my most valued clients and industry contacts for what I described as an intimate harvest celebration. What they experienced was a venue that redefined luxury event spaces in Northern California. The restored mansion featured 7 uniquely designed spaces, each with its own character and purpose. The grand ballroom combined Victorian elegance with modern acoustics and lighting systems. The conservatory provided an indoor garden setting with retractable glass walls that could open to extend the space into the formal gardens. The wine cellar offered an underground dining experience in the original caves, while the hilltop pavilion created an outdoor ceremony space with panoramic valley views. Every detail had been obsessively planned. Hidden speakers provided seamless audio throughout the property, commercial-grade kitchens could handle events for up to 300 guests, and guest suites in the mansion's towers allowed for intimate destination weddings. The gardens themselves included a rose maze, terraced herb gardens, and a reflecting pool that doubled as a unique ceremony backdrop. The response exceeded my wildest expectations. Food and Wine magazine featured the venue in a 12-page spread titled Napa's Hidden Jewel. Wedding planning websites ranked it among the top 10 most exclusive venues on the West Coast. Most importantly, I was booked solid for the next 2 years within a month of opening. Marcus's engagement party, hosted at a country club in Marin County, happened just 2 weeks after my grand opening. When my parents called to tell me about the wonderful venue they had found, I listened politely while they described features that paled in comparison to what I had created. They never asked about my business or mentioned the magazine coverage that was already generating national attention. The success of Ethereal Gardens enabled me to expand rapidly. Within a year, I had acquired 2 additional properties, a beachfront estate in Mendocino and a mountain lodge near Lake Tahoe. Each venue offered something unique while maintaining the same standards of luxury and service that had made Ethereal Gardens legendary. By 2021, my company Enchanted Venues California owned 5 exclusive properties and employed over 60 full-time staff members. We had planned events for tech billionaires, Hollywood celebrities, and international royalty. My personal net worth had climbed into the 8-figure range, though I continued to live modestly and reinvest most profits into expanding the business. Through it all, my family remained oblivious to what I had accomplished. Their conversations still treated my work as a charming hobby rather than a serious business empire. Marcus had become a junior partner at his law firm and was planning his own wedding, while my parents continued to worry about whether I was saving enough money for retirement. The disconnect was becoming almost surreal, but I had grown comfortable with the privacy. My real friends were the clients who trusted me with their most important celebrations, the vendors who had become business partners, and the staff members who shared my vision of creating perfect moments for others. I never imagined that Marcus's upcoming wedding would finally force this hidden reality into the open, or that the revelation would come through such an unexpected and dramatic phone call. Marcus's relationship with Jennifer Walsh had always been as much about strategic positioning as genuine affection. They met during his second year of law school at a charity auction, where her father was the primary sponsor. Jennifer possessed everything the Richardson family valued: impeccable breeding, social connections that opened doors, and most importantly, a family fortune built on legitimate business success rather than inherited wealth. Their courtship played out like a carefully choreographed performance designed for maximum social impact. Marcus proposed at the Napa Valley wine auction, with Jennifer's family conveniently positioned to witness the moment that would be featured in the San Francisco Chronicle's society pages. The engagement ring, a 4-carat diamond from Tiffany, came with a price tag that exceeded my entire first-year revenue, though Marcus never mentioned struggling with the expense. The engagement announcement arrived at my modest Napa apartment via an embossed invitation to their engagement party. The event was scheduled for the Hillsborough Country Club, with a guest list that read like a directory of Northern California's most influential families. I was listed as Charlotte Richardson, Marcus's sister, without any mention of my business or accomplishments, as if my primary identity remained defined by our family relationship. The party itself was everything I had come to expect from my family's events: expensive, traditional, and designed to impress rather than celebrate. Jennifer's father gave a speech about Marcus joining their family's legacy of success, while my parents beamed with pride at their son's advantageous match. I spent most of the evening deflecting well-meaning questions about my own romantic prospects and career plans, providing vague answers that seemed to satisfy people's polite curiosity. What struck me most was how Jennifer seemed genuinely excited about planning their wedding. She had grown up attending exclusive society events and had strong opinions about every detail, from the color of table linens to the specific varieties of flowers in each centerpiece. During dinner, she dominated the conversation with discussions of potential venues, each more elaborate and expensive than the last. "We're considering the St. Francis Yacht Club," she announced to the table, "though Daddy thinks the Olympic Club might be more appropriate for the ceremony. The reception simply must be somewhere that can accommodate at least 400 guests while maintaining an intimate atmosphere." Marcus nodded along enthusiastically, adding his own preferences for a venue that would photograph well for the society magazines that would undoubtedly cover their wedding. They discussed locations I had visited professionally many times, critiquing details I could have corrected but chose not to mention. "The challenge," Jennifer continued, "is finding somewhere truly spectacular that hasn't been overused by other couples in our circle. We want our wedding to set a new standard for elegance and sophistication." My mother, clearly thrilled to be included in such important planning discussions, suggested several venues she had read about in lifestyle magazines. My father contributed thoughts about the importance of choosing a location that would reflect well on both families' reputations. Throughout the conversation, no one asked for my professional opinion, despite the fact that I had planned events at most of the venues they mentioned. The irony was almost overwhelming. I had created what many considered the most exclusive and innovative wedding venue in Northern California, yet my own family was completely unaware of its existence. They were struggling to find a location that would impress their sophisticated friends, while the solution sat literally in their sister's portfolio. Following the engagement party, Marcus and Jennifer threw themselves into wedding planning with the intensity of military strategists preparing for a major campaign. They hired Vivian Cross, one of San Francisco's most sought-after wedding planners, whose client list included tech moguls, entertainment industry executives, and international celebrities. Vivian commanded fees that started at $50,000 for basic coordination and could easily reach 6 figures for elaborate productions. Her reputation was built on creating events that generated social media buzz and magazine coverage, transforming weddings into carefully crafted brand experiences for her high-profile clients. During family dinners, Marcus and Jennifer would regale us with updates on their planning progress. They had already spent more on their engagement photos than most couples invest in their entire wedding, hiring a photographer who typically worked with Hollywood celebrities. Their save-the-date cards were custom-designed letterpress creations that cost more per piece than many people spend on wedding invitations. "Vivian has been absolutely incredible," Jennifer gushed during one particularly detailed update. "She's shown us venues we never would have discovered on our own. Did you know there's a private estate in Napa that's been featured in Architectural Digest? It's completely booked for the next 3 years, but Vivian thinks she might be able to work some magic." I nearly choked on my wine. She was describing ethereal gardens, though she had several details wrong. We weren't booked for 3 years, though we were highly selective about which events we accepted. More importantly, Vivian Cross had contacted my events director twice in the past month, inquiring about availability for an unnamed high-profile client. The entertainment budget alone exceeded what most people spend on their entire buying. They had booked a jazz ensemble that regularly performed at exclusive resort destinations, along with a string quartet for the ceremony and a DJ who charged premium rates for celebrity events. The floral arrangements would feature rare orchids flown in from Thailand, designed by an artist who had created installations for the Met Gala. The dress is being custom-made by Vera Wang herself, Jennifer continued, clearly relishing the impact of each expensive detail. 3 fittings in New York with hand-beaded details that will take 6 months to complete. Marcus's tuxedo is being tailored on Savile Row in London because we want everything to be absolutely perfect. My parents hung on every word, occasionally asking questions that demonstrated their complete absorption in the spectacle being planned. They discussed guest accommodations at 5-star hotels, transportation arrangements involving luxury vehicles, and menu tastings with Michelin-starred chefs. The scale of the event was approaching corporate retreat levels, with a budget that could have funded a small business. What fascinated me most was how Jennifer approached the planning process. She had excellent taste and understood the importance of coordinating every element to create a cohesive experience. Her attention to detail rivaled my own professional standards, and her vision for the event was genuinely sophisticated rather than merely expensive. Under different circumstances, I would have enjoyed collaborating with someone who shared my passion for creating perfect celebrations. Jennifer clearly understood that successful events required more than just throwing money at prestigious vendors. They demanded careful orchestration of countless elements to achieve the desired emotional impact. Marcus, meanwhile, seemed content to approve whatever Jennifer suggested while focusing on the networking opportunities the guest list would provide. He spoke excitedly about judges who would attend, senior partners from competing law firms, and potential clients who might be impressed by the scale and sophistication of their celebration. "This wedding is really an investment in our future," he explained to my father during one conversation. "The connections we'll strengthen and the new relationships we'll build will benefit my career for decades. Jennifer understands that better than anyone, which is why we're not cutting corners on anything important." The guest list itself was a masterpiece of social engineering, carefully balanced to include family members, professional contacts, and influential figures from various industries. Jennifer's family contributed politicians, media executives, and successful entrepreneurs, while Marcus added legal professionals, judges, and business leaders he had met through his firm. My own invitation arrived with a handwritten note from Jennifer expressing hope that I could attend their special day. The ceremony was scheduled for late September at a location to be announced, with a black tie reception following immediately afterward. The invitation itself was a work of art, printed on handmade paper with gold foil accents and calligraphy that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. As the planning intensified, I found myself in the strange position of knowing more about their wedding logistics than they realized. Vivian Cross had submitted 3 separate inquiries about Ethereal Gardens availability, each time describing a discerning couple seeking the perfect venue for an autumn celebration. My events director had responded professionally, explaining our booking procedures and fee structure without revealing client identities. The requests were intriguing because they specifically mentioned requirements that perfectly matched what Marcus and Jennifer had been discussing: accommodation for 400 guests, outdoor ceremony space with backup indoor options, commercial kitchen facilities for elaborate catering, and photogenic settings suitable for magazine coverage. I began to suspect that Ethereal Gardens was on their short list of potential venues, though they had no idea their target location was owned by the sister they continued to view as a small-town party planner. The irony was delicious, but I wasn't sure whether to reveal the connection or let events unfold naturally. What I didn't anticipate was how dramatically that decision would be taken out of my hands, or how a single panicked phone call would expose the vast gap between my family's perceptions and my actual reality. The call came on a Tuesday morning in July while I was reviewing contractor proposals for the new infinity pool installation at our Mendocino property. My assistant, Rebecca Chen, had stepped out to coordinate catering deliveries for 3 simultaneous weekend events, leaving me alone in my office at Ethereal Gardens when my personal phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code indicated San Francisco. Assuming it was a potential client who had somehow obtained my direct number, I answered professionally. Charlotte Richardson speaking. Is this Charlotte Richardson, sister of Marcus Richardson? The voice was sharp, demanding, with an edge of panic that immediately put me on alert. Yes, this is Charlotte. May I ask who's calling? This is Vivian Cross of Cross Events Planning. I need to speak with you immediately about your interference with my client's wedding arrangements. I sat back in my chair, suddenly understanding exactly where this conversation was headed. Vivian Cross, the wedding planner Marcus and Jennifer had hired for their dream wedding, was calling me directly, but she clearly had no idea about my professional identity. I'm not sure what you're referring to, I said carefully. Could you be more specific about this interference? Don't play innocent with me, Vivian snapped. I know exactly what you've done. My clients specifically requested Ethereal Gardens Estate for their September wedding. It's the perfect venue for their vision, and we were prepared to meet any reasonable pricing requirements. Then, suddenly, mysteriously, the venue coordinator tells me they've had to adjust their availability due to a prior commitment from a family member. The pieces were falling into place with perfect dramatic irony. Marcus and Jennifer had indeed chosen my venue as their first choice, and Vivian had been negotiating with my events director for weeks. When Rebecca had consulted with me about the Richardson-Walsh wedding inquiry, I had recognized the names immediately, but hadn't connected them to Vivian's previous calls. And you think I'm somehow involved in this decision? I asked, genuinely curious about her reasoning. Of course you're involved. The venue coordinator specifically mentioned that Charlotte Richardson had a prior family commitment that weekend. How many Charlotte Richardsons could possibly be associated with Ethereal Gardens? You obviously used your family connection to Marcus to manipulate the booking in your favor. I almost laughed at the absurdity of her assumption. Vivian had constructed an elaborate conspiracy theory where I had somehow leveraged my relationship with Marcus to steal his wedding venue for my own event. The reality was far simpler and much more ironic. Vivian, I think there might be some confusion here. What exactly do you think my connection to Ethereal Gardens is? Look, I don't have time for games. I've done my research. You work in event planning in Napa Valley, probably as a coordinator or assistant. You obviously heard about Marcus's wedding plans and decided to book the venue for whatever little event you're planning. Well, let me tell you something. This is completely unprofessional and potentially illegal. The accusation was so wildly off base that I found myself momentarily speechless. Vivian had somehow convinced herself that I was a low-level event planner who had sabotaged my own brother's wedding out of jealousy or spite. Vivian, before you continue making accusations, perhaps you should verify your assumptions about my role at Ethereal Gardens. I know exactly what your role is. You probably clean up after events or help with basic coordination. And now you think you can use your brother's name to book the premier venue in Northern California for your own purposes? Well, I have news for you. My clients are extremely influential people. They have connections that could destroy your little career in this industry. The threat was delivered with such conviction that I almost felt sorry for her. Vivian Cross had built her reputation on managing the weddings of powerful people, and she was accustomed to intimidating vendors and service providers into compliance. Unfortunately for her, she had fundamentally misunderstood the power dynamic in this particular situation. Vivian, let me ask you something. When you contacted Ethereal Gardens about availability, who did you speak with initially? Rebecca Chen, the events director. A very professional woman, though apparently not above corruption when family members are involved. And when Rebecca mentioned a prior commitment from Charlotte Richardson, what exactly did she tell you? She said that Miss Richardson had a standing family obligation that weekend and that the venue couldn't accommodate our event. Obviously, she was referring to whatever little gathering you're planning. I realized that Rebecca had been trying to give Vivian a polite way to understand the situation without explicitly revealing that the client inquiring about the venue was related to the owner. Rebecca knew about my family dynamics and had assumed that Marcus and Jennifer would naturally want to inform me about their interest in using my venue. Vivian, I need to clarify something important. When Rebecca mentioned Charlotte Richardson's prior commitment, she wasn't referring to me booking the venue as a client. She was referring to me as the owner. There was a long pause on the line. When Vivian spoke again, her voice had lost some of its aggressive edge, replaced by confusion. What do you mean, owner? I mean that I own Ethereal Gardens Estate. I also own Sapphire Cove in Mendocino, Alpine Majesty Lodge near Lake Tahoe, and 2 other luxury venues throughout California. Enchanted Venues California is my company. The silence that followed was so complete, I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Vivian's voice returned, much smaller and significantly less confident. That's impossible. Marcus said his sister works as a party planner. He specifically mentioned that you handle small local events. Marcus has never shown much interest in the details of my career. We don't communicate regularly about business matters. But you're listed as Charlotte Richardson in their family information. You can't be the same Charlotte Richardson who owns Enchanted Venues California. Charlotte Richardson is one of the most successful hospitality entrepreneurs on the West Coast. I am Charlotte Richardson, Vivian, and now I understand why Rebecca told you that Ethereal Gardens was unavailable for your client's September date. Another pause, longer this time. When Vivian spoke again, her tone had shifted from accusatory to desperate. Wait. You're telling me that Marcus Richardson's sister is Charlotte Richardson of Enchanted Venues? Charlotte Richardson who was featured on the cover of Hospitality Today last month? That would be me, yes. And Rebecca Chen told you that we were inquiring about booking Ethereal Gardens for Marcus Richardson's wedding? She did. She also mentioned that the client specifically requested that weekend, which happens to be my birthday. I always keep that weekend available for personal commitments. Oh my God! Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. I just accused the owner of California's most exclusive venue collection of sabotaging her own brother's wedding. I threatened to destroy your career in the industry. You did, yes, though I appreciate your passion for advocating for your clients. Marcus and Jennifer have no idea, do they? They don't know that you own the venue they've been desperately trying to book. No, they don't. My family isn't particularly well informed about my business activities. This is a disaster, an absolute disaster. They've already sent save the dates mentioning a spectacular venue reveal coming soon. I've built their expectations around Ethereal Gardens being their wedding location. The bride has planned her entire design concept around your property's aesthetic. I could hear the panic building in Vivian's voice as she realized the implications of her mistake. She had promised her high-profile clients a venue that she now understood was completely unavailable, owned by a family member they had apparently never bothered to consult about their wedding plans. Vivian, take a breath. This situation isn't as dire as you think. How is it not dire? I've just discovered that my client's perfect venue is owned by a family member who they've clearly never even discussed their wedding with. What kind of family dynamic am I dealing with here? A complicated one, I admitted, but that doesn't mean we can't find a solution. A solution? You just told me that you keep your birthday weekend available for personal commitments. You're not going to give up your own celebration to host your brother's wedding, especially when he doesn't even know you own the place. You're right that I keep that weekend available, but I didn't say what kind of personal commitment I was keeping it for. I don't understand. Vivian, what if I told you that hosting my brother's wedding at my venue might actually be the perfect way to celebrate my birthday? The conversation that followed would reshape not only Marcus and Jennifer's wedding plans, but also the entire dynamic of my relationship with my family. But first, Vivian Cross needed to understand exactly what she had stumbled into and how a simple phone call had revealed a family secret that was about to change everything. After my conversation with Vivian Cross, I found myself in an unprecedented position. For the first time in my adult life, I held information that could dramatically alter my family's perception of me. But the decision of how to reveal it was entirely mine. I could continue living in the shadows of their assumptions, or I could force them to confront the reality of who I had become. I gave Vivian 24 hours to decide how she wanted to handle the situation with Marcus and Jennifer. She could either continue searching for alternative venues while keeping my identity secret, or she could facilitate a conversation that would finally bridge the gap between my family's perceptions and my actual accomplishments. That evening, I drove through the winding roads of Ethereal Gardens as the sun set over the valley, considering my options. The property had never looked more beautiful. The restoration work on the original Victorian mansion was complete, the gardens were at peak summer bloom, and the new infinity pool reflected the golden light like a mirror. This was my life's work, my legacy, and my sanctuary. The next morning, Vivian called back with her decision. "Charlotte, I've been awake all night thinking about this situation. I believe Marcus and Jennifer deserve to know the truth, not just about your identity, but about what an incredible opportunity they're missing by not having you involved in their wedding planning." "That's very diplomatic of you, Vivian." "It's more than diplomatic. It's honest. I've seen the way Jennifer talks about family dynamics, and I think she genuinely wants to build better relationships with Marcus's relatives. She's mentioned several times that she wishes she knew you better." "And Marcus?" "Marcus is more complicated. He clearly sees himself as the family success story, and learning about your achievements might challenge that self-image. But he's also ambitious enough to recognize the value of having a sister who owns the most exclusive venues in Northern California." We agreed that Vivian would arrange a meeting under the pretense of showing them a potential venue option that had recently become available. She would bring them to Ethereal Gardens for a tour, and I would reveal my identity during the visit. It felt like the most natural way to let the truth emerge organically rather than staging a dramatic confrontation. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. I spent Friday evening preparing both the property and myself for what would undoubtedly be one of the most significant conversations of my life. Rebecca helped me select which spaces to showcase, ensuring that Marcus and Jennifer would see Ethereal Gardens at its absolute finest. Saturday arrived with perfect weather. The gardens were immaculate, the mansion gleamed in the afternoon sunlight, and every detail reflected the standards of excellence I had worked years to establish. I positioned myself in the conservatory, reviewing client files while keeping an eye on the main entrance. At precisely 2 o'clock, Vivian's silver Mercedes pulled up the circular drive, followed by a BMW I recognized as Marcus's car. Through the conservatory's glass walls, I watched my brother and his fiancée emerge, their expressions immediately registering awe at the property's grandeur. Vivian led them up the front steps while pointing out architectural details and landscaping features. I could hear her explaining the venue's capacity, amenities, and reputation as they approached the main entrance. Jennifer was asking detailed questions about vendor access, lighting options, and photo opportunities, while Marcus seemed focused on the prestige associated with hosting an event at such an exclusive location. "The owner has agreed to meet with you personally," Vivian was saying as they entered the main hall. "She rarely takes client meetings herself, but given the scope of your event and the timeline, she's made an exception." I took a deep breath and walked from the conservatory into the grand foyer where they were admiring the restored chandelier and marble floors. The moment Marcus saw me, his expression shifted from polite interest to complete confusion. "Charlotte, what are you doing here?" Jennifer looked between us uncertainly, while Vivian stepped back slightly, giving us space for what she knew would be a significant moment. "Hello, Marcus. Jennifer, it's wonderful to finally meet you properly. I extended my hand to Jennifer, who shook it while still looking puzzled. I don't understand, Marcus said. Vivian told us we were meeting with the venue owner to discuss our wedding. Why are you here? Because I am the venue owner, Marcus. The silence that followed was so complete that I could hear the fountain in the garden outside. Marcus stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language, while Jennifer's eyes widened with dawning comprehension. That's impossible, Marcus said flatly. You plan small parties in Napa. You told us you work in event coordination. I do work in event coordination. I coordinate events at the 5 luxury venues I own throughout California. Jennifer was the first to recover her composure. You're Charlotte Richardson of Enchanted Venues, California? When I nodded, she continued, We've been trying to book Ethereal Gardens for months. Vivian said it was the most exclusive venue in the region. It is, and you're welcome to book it for your wedding, if you'd like. Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out as a croak. You own this place? This entire estate? I own this estate, along with Sapphire Cove in Mendocino, Alpine Majesty Lodge near Lake Tahoe, and 2 other properties. Enchanted Venues California has been my company for the past 8 years. But you never said. We thought you were struggling to make ends meet with your little party planning business. You thought that because you never asked about the details of my work. When I mentioned expanding the business or acquiring new properties, you assumed I meant renting additional folding tables. Jennifer had begun walking around the foyer, examining details with the eye of someone who understood quality and craftsmanship. This restoration is incredible. The attention to historical accuracy while incorporating modern amenities, this must have cost millions. It did. The initial property acquisition and renovation totaled just over $12 million. We've invested another $4 million in improvements and expansion since opening. Marcus sank into one of the antique chairs near the fireplace, clearly struggling to process what he was hearing. $16 million? Charlotte, where did you get $16 million? I earned it, Marcus, through the same little party planning business you've been dismissing for years. Vivian, who had been watching this exchange with fascination, stepped forward diplomatically. Perhaps I should give you some privacy to discuss this as a family. Charlotte, should I show Jennifer the ceremony spaces while you and Marcus talk? Jennifer eagerly accepted the offer, clearly wanting to see more of the property, while also sensing that Marcus needed time to absorb this revelation. As they headed toward the gardens, I sat across from my brother in the elegant sitting room where I had hosted tech moguls, Hollywood celebrities, and international dignitaries. I don't understand how this is possible, Marcus said quietly. When did this happen? How did you afford all of this? It happened gradually, over 8 years of building client relationships, expanding services, and reinvesting profits into property acquisitions, the same way anyone builds a successful business. But you never told us. Why didn't you tell us? I tried to tell you, Marcus. For years, I tried to share what I was accomplishing. But every time I mentioned my work, you would make jokes about me handing out peanuts or cleaning up after parties. Mom and Dad would change the subject to your latest court victory or partnership news. Eventually, I stopped trying. We thought you were struggling. We worried about you. You worried about the version of me that existed in your imagination. You never bothered to learn about the real me. Marcus looked around the room, taking in the museum-quality furnishings, the original oil paintings, and the subtle details that marked this as a space where significant events occurred. All those times we talked about finding the perfect venue for the wedding, you could have suggested this place. Could I? When have any of you ever asked for my professional opinion about anything? When have you ever treated my work as something more than a hobby? That's not fair, Charlotte, isn't it? At your engagement party, you and Jennifer spent an hour discussing venues while I sat at the same table. Neither of you thought to ask the event planner in the family for suggestions. We didn't know you were this kind of event planner. Because you didn't want to know. It was easier to maintain your assumptions than to discover that your little sister had built something impressive. Through the conservatory windows, I could see Jennifer and Vivian exploring the rose garden, with Jennifer taking photos and pointing excitedly at various features. Whatever her reaction to this revelation, she was clearly enchanted by the property itself. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked. "Are you going to let us book this place for our wedding, or are you going to make us find somewhere else because we didn't know who you were?" "That depends entirely on whether you want your wedding to be planned by your sister or by someone you think collects garbage at parties." The question hung between us like a challenge, and I could see Marcus grappling with everything this conversation had revealed about our family dynamics, my hidden success, and the assumptions that had shaped our relationship for decades. The silence between Marcus and me stretched until Jennifer's laughter echoed from the gardens, breaking the tension that had settled over our conversation. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, we could see her and Vivian examining the outdoor ceremony pavilion, with Jennifer gesturing enthusiastically at the panoramic valley views. "She really loves this place," Marcus observed, his voice carrying a mixture of wonder and resignation. "It's designed to be loved. Every detail exists to create perfect moments for people celebrating the most important days of their lives." Marcus stood and walked to the window, watching his fiancée exploring what could potentially become their wedding venue. "You know, she's been stressed about finding the right location. She has such a specific vision for our wedding, and nothing we've seen has felt quite right to her." "What's her vision?" "Elegant but not stuffy, sophisticated but warm. She wants our guests to feel like they're experiencing something special, not just attending another fancy party." He turned back to me. "From what I can see out there, this place embodies exactly what she's been trying to describe." I joined him at the window, observing Jennifer as she carefully examined the stonework of the ceremony altar and testing the acoustics by speaking to Vivian from different positions. Her attention to detail impressed me. She was evaluating the space like someone who understands the importance of every element working together harmoniously. She has good instincts. The way she's assessing sight lines and natural lighting shows she understands how spaces function for events. Jennifer studied art history and museum curation before she went into nonprofit work. She has an eye for aesthetics and historical preservation. This was the first time Marcus had shared substantive information about Jennifer's background beyond her family connections. I realized that while I had been building my business empire in isolation, he had been building a relationship with someone who might actually appreciate what I had created. "Marcus, can I ask you something honestly? After everything that's happened today, I think honesty is overdue. Why didn't you ever ask me about my work? Not just the basics, but the real details of what I was building." He was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously. "I think I was afraid to discover that you were more successful than me." The admission surprised me with its directness. "Afraid?" Growing up, I was always the achiever, the one who made mom and dad proud. That identity became so central to who I am that the possibility of you surpassing me felt threatening. It was easier to maintain my assumptions about your small party planning business than to confront the fact that you might have built something more impressive than my law career. And now? Now I'm realizing that your success doesn't diminish mine. If anything, having a sister who owns places like this enhances both our families' reputations. It was a pragmatic response, typical of Marcus's networking mindset, but I sensed genuine appreciation beneath the strategic thinking. He was beginning to understand that my achievements reflect well on our entire family, rather than threatening his position as the golden child. Jennifer and Vivian returned from their garden tour, with Jennifer practically glowing with excitement. "Charlotte, this property is absolutely magical. The ceremony space with those mountain views, the way the gardens flow into different intimate areas for cocktails, and that conservatory, it's like you designed everything specifically for our wedding vision." "Thank you. That means a great deal coming from someone with your background in curation." Jennifer looked surprised that I knew about her professional experience. "Marcus told you about my museum work?" "He mentioned your expertise in art history and preservation. I can see how that knowledge influenced your assessment of the property." "The restoration work here is museum quality. How did you manage to preserve so many original details while integrating modern systems? For the next hour, Jennifer and I discussed architectural preservation, design philosophy, and the challenges of creating luxury amenities within historical structures. Her questions were sophisticated, and her appreciation for the craftsmanship was genuine. I found myself enjoying the conversation more than I had expected. Marcus and Vivian, meanwhile, were discussing logistical details about guest capacity, vendor access, and timeline requirements. I was impressed by how thoroughly Marcus had researched wedding planning considerations. His questions demonstrated real preparation rather than casual interest. Charlotte, Jennifer said eventually, I have to ask directly, would you be willing to host our wedding here? Not just as the venue owner, but as Marcus's sister who wants to be part of our celebration. The question was more complex than it appeared on the surface. She was asking me to forgive years of family dismissal and embrace a relationship that had been strained by misunderstanding and mutual assumptions. But she was also offering something I hadn't realized I wanted: the opportunity to use my professional expertise to create a perfect day for my own family. I would be honored to host your wedding here, on one condition. Marcus tensed slightly. What condition? I want to be involved in the planning process as your sister, not just as the venue provider. I want to understand your vision and help make it reality, not simply hand over the keys and step back. Jennifer's face lit up. Are you saying you want to plan our wedding with us? I'm saying I want to plan your wedding for you. Vivian is an excellent coordinator, but this is my venue and my family. I want to create something extraordinary that reflects both your vision and the love I have for my brother, despite our complicated history. Vivian looked momentarily concerned about her role in the proceedings, but I quickly addressed her fears. Vivian, I would like you to remain as the primary coordinator. Your reputation and client relationships are invaluable, and Jennifer trusts you. I'm suggesting a collaboration where I handle venue-specific elements while you manage vendors, timeline, and logistics. That could work beautifully, Vivian agreed. Your knowledge of the property combined with my vendor relationships could create something truly spectacular. Marcus had been listening to this exchange with growing amazement. You're offering to plan our entire wedding? After we spent years dismissing your work and never recognizing your accomplishments? I'm offering to plan your wedding because you're my brother, and because Jennifer clearly has exquisite taste that I'd enjoy bringing to life. The past doesn't disappear, but it doesn't have to define our future relationship either. What about your birthday weekend? You said you always keep that time available for personal commitments. Planning my brother's wedding at my own venue sounds like a perfect birthday celebration to me. The emotional impact of this statement was immediate. Jennifer teared up. Marcus looked genuinely moved, and even Vivian seemed touched by the gesture. We spent the remainder of the afternoon walking through different areas of the property, with Jennifer and I collaborating on ideas while Marcus and Vivian worked through practical considerations. By evening, we had sketched out a preliminary timeline and design concept that incorporated Jennifer's sophisticated aesthetic vision with the unique features of Ethereum Gardens. The outdoor ceremony would take place at sunset in the hillside pavilion, with the reception flowing through multiple spaces, including the conservatory, the main ballroom, and the garden terraces. There's one more thing we need to discuss, I said as we gathered in the main sitting room to review our plans. Mom and Dad. Marcus winced. They don't know about any of this yet. They still think you're struggling to make ends meet with small local events. They're going to find out when they receive an invitation to a wedding at Ethereal Gardens. The question is whether you want to tell them beforehand or let them discover the truth when they arrive. Jennifer looked between Marcus and me uncertainly. What do you think would be better for family harmony? I think, Marcus said slowly, that our parents need to understand what they've been missing, not just about Charlotte's success, but about their own daughter's remarkable accomplishments. They should hear it from us, together, so they understand that we're building a new kind of family relationship based on mutual respect. It was perhaps the most mature statement I had ever heard Marcus make about family dynamics. The golden child was finally ready to share the spotlight, and more importantly, to acknowledge that the spotlight had been shining in the wrong direction for years. Then we'll tell them together, I agreed, and we'll show them what their daughter has built while they weren't paying attention. The wedding planning was about to become the catalyst for rebuilding not just Marcus's and my relationship, but the entire family's understanding of who we had all become. The conversation with our parents took place 3 weeks later at their Sacramento home, where Marcus and I had requested a family dinner to discuss important wedding updates. Jennifer had wisely chosen to let us handle this revelation, understanding that some family dynamics needed to be resolved privately before she could fully integrate into our complicated relationships. Mom had prepared Marcus's favorite meal, as she always did when he visited, setting the dining room table with her best china and lighting candles as if this were a celebration rather than a potentially explosive conversation. Dad poured wine and asked about Marcus's latest cases, following the familiar script of family gatherings focused entirely on his achievements. "So, what's this important update about the wedding?" Mom asked as we finished the main course. "Have you finally found the perfect venue? I know Jennifer has been very particular about the location." Marcus glanced at me before responding. "We have found the perfect venue, actually. That's what we wanted to discuss with you." "Wonderful. Where is it? Somewhere in Napa, I assume, given Jennifer's family connections there?" "It's called Ethereal Gardens Estate," Marcus said carefully. "It's been featured in several national magazines as one of the most exclusive venues in Northern California." Dad nodded approvingly. "Sounds expensive, but appropriate for your wedding. Jennifer's family certainly knows how to choose prestigious locations." "Actually, Dad, Jennifer's family didn't choose it. Charlotte did." The silence that followed was profound. Mom and Dad exchanged confused glances before Mom spoke. "Charlotte recommended it? That's nice, dear, but I'm surprised she would know about such an upscale venue." "She doesn't just know about it, Mom," Marcus continued. "She owns it." The wine glass in Dad's hand stopped halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean she owns it?" I decided it was time to speak for myself. I mean, that Ethereal Gardens estate is one of 5 luxury venues I own throughout California. My company, Enchanted Venues California, has been operating for 8 years. "That's impossible," Mom said flatly. "You plan small parties in Napa. You told us you work in event coordination." "I do work in event coordination. I coordinate weddings and corporate events for celebrities, tech executives, and international clients at properties I own and operate." Dad set down his wine glass with a sharp clink. "Charlotte, this isn't funny. Stop exaggerating your little party planning business." Marcus intervened firmly. "Dad, she's not exaggerating. I've seen the property, the client testimonials, the magazine features. Charlotte owns a multi-million-dollar hospitality empire." "Multi-million-dollar?" Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "Last year's revenue exceeded $15 million, I said quietly. "The company is valued at just over $50 million. The silence that followed was different from their earlier confusion. This was the silence of people whose fundamental understanding of reality had just been shattered. Dad stared at me as if I had suddenly sprouted wings, while Mom's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. "But you never said. We thought you were struggling to pay rent on that little apartment," Mom finally managed. "I moved out of that apartment 5 years ago. I live in a restored Victorian mansion on the Ethereal Gardens property. I also own a beach house in Mendocino and a cabin in Lake Tahoe." "Why didn't you tell us?" Dad demanded, his voice carrying more hurt than anger. "I tried to tell you, for years. Every time I mentioned expanding the business or acquiring new properties, you assumed I meant renting additional folding tables. When I said I was working with high-profile clients, you thought I meant the local country club. You were so convinced that I was barely getting by that you stopped listening to what I was actually saying." Mom was crying now, though she was trying to hide it. "We sent you care packages. We worried about you constantly. You worried about an imaginary version of me that existed only in your minds. You never asked about my actual life because you had already decided what it must be like." "We were trying to be supportive," Dad protested. "No, you were trying to be a parent to a child who stopped existing years ago. The real me, the successful businesswoman who built something extraordinary, never got your support because you refused to see her." Marcus reached across the table and touched my hand briefly. What Charlotte is trying to say is that we've all been operating on assumptions instead of actually communicating with each other. And now, Mom asked through her tears, what happens now? Now we start over, I said, with honesty instead of assumptions, with questions instead of conclusions, with respect for who we actually are instead of who we used to be. The conversation that followed lasted until nearly midnight. For the first time in decades, our parents asked genuine questions about my work, my goals, my life. They wanted to understand how they had built such a successful company, what my daily responsibilities included, and how they had missed something so significant happening right under their noses. More importantly, they began to understand how their favoritism toward Marcus had affected our relationship and my willingness to share my achievements with them. Dad admitted that he had been proud of Marcus's conventional success in ways that were easier to understand and explain to friends. Mom acknowledged that she had been worried about my unconventional career path and had perhaps projected her own fears onto my situation. We failed you, Dad said finally. As parents, we failed to see and celebrate our own daughter's remarkable accomplishments. You failed to know me, I corrected gently, but that can change if we all commit to doing better. The weeks that followed transformed our family dynamics in ways I had never thought possible. Mom and Dad visited Ethereal Gardens, taking a comprehensive tour that helped them understand the scope and sophistication of what I had created. Dad, who had always been intimidated by artistic endeavors, was fascinated by the business strategy and financial management required to operate luxury venues. Mom threw herself into learning about event planning, asking detailed questions about vendor relationships, client management, and the creative process behind designing perfect celebrations. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like my parents were genuinely interested in my work rather than simply tolerating it. The wedding planning became a family collaboration that strengthened bonds while creating something beautiful. Jennifer and I worked together on design elements, combining her artistic vision with my technical expertise. Marcus contributed his organizational skills and attention to legal details, while Vivian coordinated the complex logistics of a 400-guest celebration. Our parents became enthusiastic supporters, with Dad helping to coordinate transportation for elderly relatives and Mom assisting with guest communications. They were proud to tell friends that their daughter owned the venue where Marcus was getting married, and their genuine excitement about my success felt like validation I had been waiting for my entire life. The wedding itself exceeded everyone's expectations. September 15th dawned clear and perfect, with the kind of golden light that made Napa Valley famous. The ceremony took place at sunset in the Hillside Pavilion, with Jennifer walking down an aisle lined with white roses and olive branches toward Marcus, who waited beneath an arch of grapevines and eucalyptus. As I watched my brother marry the woman who had immediately recognized and appreciated my work, I felt a profound sense of completion. This wasn't just a wedding, it was the celebration of a new kind of family relationship built on mutual respect and genuine understanding. The reception flowed seamlessly through multiple spaces, with guests moving from cocktails in the Rose Garden to dinner in the conservatory and dancing in the main ballroom. Every detail reflected the collaboration between Jennifer's sophisticated taste and my professional expertise, creating an event that felt both elegant and warmly personal. During the toasts, Marcus surprised everyone by speaking directly about our transformed relationship. My sister Charlotte created more than just a beautiful venue for our wedding, he said, looking directly at me. She created an opportunity for our family to finally see each other clearly. Tonight, we're not just celebrating Jennifer and me, we're celebrating the remarkable woman who made this magical place possible. The applause that followed wasn't just for the venue or the wedding, it was recognition of a journey that had brought us all to a place of authentic connection and mutual pride. As the evening concluded and the last guests departed, I stood on the conservatory terrace with Jennifer and Marcus, looking out over the property that had become both my professional masterpiece and the catalyst for healing my family relationships. "Thank you," Jennifer said softly, "not just for hosting our wedding, but for showing us what family can be when everyone is seen and valued for who they really are." Marcus nodded, putting his arm around his new wife. I'm sorry it took so long for me to recognize what an extraordinary person my sister is, but I'm grateful we found our way here. Looking back on that journey from family dismissal to genuine recognition, I realized that building a successful business had been only part of my achievement. The greater victory was creating a life where my worth was no longer dependent on external validation, where I could offer forgiveness without compromising my self-respect, and where success was measured not just in dollars, but in the depth of authentic relationships. The venue that had revealed my hidden success to my family had also become the place where we learned to truly see and celebrate each other. Sometimes the most beautiful transformations happen not in spite of our struggles, but because of them, when we finally find the courage to show the world who we really are. Looking for more? We've got two amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.